Hello, John Reed. I am back, and I've got one of my favorite podcast and video companions, Thomas Wieberneit. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. And today here, podcasting or hotcasting?
Yeah, well, maybe both. We are here for a workshopping AI and human creativity round something. I think I've done 3 or 4 of these. I have slides. Some of the ugliest slides you'll ever see, but that's unfortunately the price of human creativity at this point is that I'm not very good with slide decks. And generative AI, by the way, isn't either because I've tried. So Thomas, you are going to contribute in whatever ways as I go through this. And for those of you listening, this is mostly all new material, but there is a little bit from past workshopping sessions. I just want to say a couple things about this topic. I feel really strongly about this topic because long before I got involved in enterprise work, which was a long time ago, I was, trying to tap into the depths of my artistic creativity, and I have a dog in this fight in terms of AI versus human creativity, and I think actually the future of humanity is at stake on this topic, but at least the future of a world that I would want to live in. But at the same time, there's room to have some fun with this topic also. And the fact of the matter is that I'm reaching the point where the future of humanity is going to be passed on to other generations. It's not going to be my job for like an incredible amount of time going forward. So I'm somewhat at peace with these things, but when I take a step back, I want people to kind of experience the types of creative moments that I've seen in my life and in those who create beautiful art, and also in the enterprise context. We're going to talk about this too, because I think we're missing something when we relegate certain skills to machines, including creativity, which actually is happening. And so one of the things that inspired this was this sense of like, what are machines good for in the role of workplaces and the role of our lives, and what are they not? And I thought this was a really interesting one. This viral comment: I want AI to do my laundry and dishes so I can do art and writing, not for AI to do my art and writing so that I can do my laundry and dishes. I think that's a very, very jugular way of expressing sort of a crossroads here, and to maybe start asking ourselves, what kind of AI do we want, and can we, instead of taking a passive sort of attitude towards the technology that's unfolding, why don't we insert ourselves into this conversation a little more? Now, one of the things I wrote in response was the fact that, in fact, laundry and dishes are actually more difficult for AI than
Right.
art and writing. So that's one of the reasons why this is the reverse. You can bet, Thomas, that if it was possible to have robots do this work, and you could sell really expensive robots to come into our homes and do that, that would be happening. I don't think there's any like corporate, denial of the possibility for a market there. It's just that it's actually very, very difficult physical robotics, and it's still confined to fairly controlled settings for the most part. Now, having said that, like, I do think that it's also overstated a little bit here, which is a theme that I'm going to come back to. But AI technically doesn't do art. Humans do art. AI does basically content generation, which is a little bit different. Now, having said that, there's artists and creative people and even corporate workers using AI to complete creative tasks. I mean, that's going to happen. I mean, I'm not anti AI. I've actually saw a great agentic AI demo today. So I respect some of the advancements that have been made in what we're doing. So there's a lot of opportunity too. And humans have always used technology in the service of creation, which is something, Thomas, you referred to, I think, before we went live. And I don't think AI ultimately is any different. It can be a tool to unleash human creativity. It's not necessarily at odds with it, as this quote implies, but I think this is a wonderful starting point for a spicy show. Hi, Brent. Who would have thought talking about AI and content creation would be a welcome departure from talking about anything? and then tariffs and Liberation Day happened. Yeah, right.
Well,
This is comparatively light, fun topic, wouldn't you say, Brent, compared to what else we could be talking about today?
yeah.
So
And just the combination of those two different points of view is a kind of an act of creativity in itself, isn't it? So kudos to
it
Brent.
is. It is indeed. And thanks. Keep the comments coming.
Yeah.
So let me just tell you what this talk is not about. The talk is not about the loss of creative jobs in industries such as voice acting and design, which serious discussion for another time. And it's also not about the unethical and sometimes illegal training of Gen AI off the backs of creators, which is another serious discussion. I just want to put that out there so we can leave that there. There's a lot of important work being done in this area. And, if you follow my feeds and articles, you know that I link to that content. So there's a lot of unresolved lawsuits as well, but that's not what we're talking about today.
So we are severely limiting our own creativity right now.
We are restricting the focus a little bit. Now, obviously, if you really want to go there, we can go there. I'm just saying we got an hour's worth of time, and there's some things I want to cover, and those aren't the things I'm going to spend a lot of time on today. Whether today's generative AI is truly creative, whether it will evolve into sophisticated creativity. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about that. But the one thing I will say is that someday we're going to have machines that I think overlap much more with what we would consider human creativity than the current capabilities. And that's also another discussion because we'd have to get pretty deep into today's AI technology versus what might be coming in terms of different things like more sort of fused systems of generative and neurosymbolic, some of the work that Jan LeCun is doing, perhaps. There's a whole lot of stuff we could talk about there. That's not what we're going to talk about today either. So what the hell are we going to talk about, right? What we're going to talk about is what I can't even read because this stupid thing is in the way. But what we're going to talk about is the future of human creativity and why human creativity amidst machines still matters in the enterprise and beyond. That's what I want to talk about today. So anyhow, will generative AI creativity supplant human creators, not just as job professions, but as ways of finding meaning? And if so, what are the enterprise implications? And so one of the things that I ran into in the last year, Thomas, that inspired this was people talking about what skills. I would go to these panels. There'd be analysts on these panels, like gurus, right? And they would say, well, here's a list of skills that machines can't replace. And creativity was never on there. And I felt like, I think we're really giving short shrift to the importance of creative problem solving in the modern enterprise context. And, the tariff concepts is a really interesting sort of thing as far as circumstances of business are changing so fast all the time. And we have to be able to adapt constantly, and so to me, creativity isn't just about what a creative person would do. It's kind of how we all approach our work and our jobs. And I think we make a really, really big mistake if we think that AI is going to take that off of our hands. Now, we could have a long conversation about the kind of stuff that AI is pretty good for in a content generation realm. And that's a whole another discussion we could have as far as I've seen some interesting use cases. I have a friend who's using it to create podcasts that she can share with clients. And I'll get into a little bit in our discussion why that can be useful from kind of a so-called hyper-personalized perspective of giving someone a podcast that was created just for them with their data, right? And two people talking. That's kind of interesting. And the content generation it can be really useful. I just really got troubled when I just felt like this essential skill was being left off the map. So I'm putting it back on the map and saying, don't give up on human creativity, folks. You're going to need it if you want to be successful. So.
Yeah, that is what we started to talk about just before we went live. I think Well, let's start from creativity. What is creativity? And I'm just on the Britannica pages right now. Something else than
All
my
right.
usual haunt. So what does Britannica say is creativity? The ability to make or otherwise bring into existence something new, whether a new solution to a problem, a new method or a device, or a new artistic object or form. This is
Yep.
quite abstract. Not to say abstract to an extent that it's almost meaningless. So what is new is another definition, or is another point there. New is something to me that I haven't seen before. Now, in that sense, one could say there's something like machine creativity, but how does it get exhibited? So this gets into the skill section that you probably that you previously mentioned, is the ability to create something new. Is, let's say, a painting. So well, give me a pen and the painting that will be resulting out of it is beyond abysmal. So you won't make me a Monet or a Van Gogh or whatever. Yeah. But I have the ability to express my thoughts. So, and this is probably the most important change that this technology brings. So it enables people like me who are totally, was it left-brained, right? So on the logic side, or pretty much on the logic side, to create something that can be perceived as artistic.
Right.
By virtue of me being able to express it. And what that basically does mean is ultimately it's just another tool it's just like a pen, just a bit more complex. And
Right.
the prompts are probably a bit
yeah.
more expensive too.
Yeah, and there are interesting use cases for that. There's not. I don't think that the use cases for that are going to drive the enterprise forward in a powerful way, but there are things you can do. I mean, like for example, I made a friend of mine a birthday animation because I'm not very fast or good at video animations. I use generative AI to do that. Having said that, the reason that it went over well was because of the script that I wrote. And I'm good at that, right? So I had like humor and funny touches and like, but there was a part of it that I couldn't do, and that really works well. The podcasting example that my friend uses is interesting because it's a hyper personalized thing you would send to a client, and one of the things she said to me about it was, I can't do that at scale for all my clients. You know, I can't personally do that. I can use this tool. And it actually discusses their situation. It's kind of like a engaging way of giving an update on evaluating their performance based on survey data in the form of a podcast that's machine generated. It's pretty cool. But so there's something relatively creative about that format, right? But the reason I would call it content generation and not creativity is because it's relying on existing data to produce an artifact. It's not like, it's not going to pull in something new and different. It's not going to have a new idea unless you prompt it. You could prompt it, but that's the human inserting itself. And so I think what we're going to see a lot is sort of these hybrid things where the machine gets all the credit, but in fact the human creating the prompt or the script is actually a crucial part of how the creative artifact got put. But I'm taking a little bit of a step back in my definition of creativity and not just talking about work product or intellectual or IP. I'm also talking about just how we approach the workplace and our jobs. And one of the things I think about in terms of creativity is adapting to constantly changing circumstances with a problem-solving mentality. And in my view, that is a characteristic we're going to be looking for in the employees of the future. And so we just don't want to lose track of that because we're kind of off-ramping creativity to machines that appear to be better and faster at us at that process. So with that in mind, so this is where I challenge my own argument, Thomas. So I'm going to try to deconstruct my own argument a little bit. So
to help there.
Yeah, I'm sure you can really help push this over. So here's what keeps me up at night a little bit. So I start off by saying there's no substitute for the transcendent live experience of a human artist in their element. You know, I go back to Bob Dylan, 1966, There's some bootleg performances of him playing places like the
Mm.
Royal Albert Hall with just an acoustic guitar, and you could hear a pin drop. And like the people who were there and experienced that, like were part of a moment that they'll never forget. A machine can't do that. Not right now. Taylor Swift is another example, and I'm not a big Swiftie, but I've talked to Swifties and I know how they feel about those concerts. Like so those are kind of peak creative experiences to participate in that are really not threatened by anything a machine can do today. However, how does creativity get threatened in that context? One is abundant mediocrity becomes a proxy for quality. We settle for choice over transcendent experiences. And I concede that AI could someday generate films as dull as Batman and Robin Part 75. You know, anything that has a formula could potentially be recreated pretty easily. So the more formulaic and mediocre the content we accept is, the more I think AI can supplant human creativity in an artistic sense. The next big concern I have is that viral engagement becomes a proxy for quality. And I've written an article about this in Diginomica because it what kept me up at night thinking about it. And you see that all over our social feeds. I saw it on LinkedIn today.
I'm guilty
And
of that as well to some extent.
right, I mean we all are looking for some level of
Yeah.
engagement, but you know, there's a bunch of stuff 404 Media is doing right now on how AI, what they call AI slop, getting like tons of views on Instagram. And it's really honestly very, very disturbing AI generated content. It's so disturbing I can't even like describe it in this thing. But let's just say it's for mature audiences only kind of viral stuff that has a real shock value to it. And again, like if that starts to dominate the landscape to a point and it gets the engagement, then that does become a proxy for quality. The next one is hyper-personalized AI generated content becomes a proxy for quality. So in other words, like if you can personalize content so much for someone, they might settle for that over the kind of transcendent experiences that I'm talking about. Like so one of the examples of that was the podcast scenario I described, right? Where if I can send you like for example, like at the end of the day today, if I sent you like a machine generated podcast that shared like the top 15 like debate points that you and I have had over the years, like you might listen to that, like, and a lot of people wouldn't, but you would because it's connected to you and me and it's our dialogue. So I think there's a really interesting aspect, and I'm not saying this is all bad. I'm just saying that becomes another way where attention gets claimed by hyper personalized content. And then the other thing is as AI closes the gap enough with human creators. So example, music industry struggles. Most music for music reactors is decades old. I could have listed a bunch of examples now. Films that don't get made anymore, like Apocalypse Now. David Lynch, my favorite director of all time, gave up on Hollywood long before AI even came along. But so the point being like that when you have like a decline in the caliber of the best art, you know, then what AI can produce, the gap automatically closes. So anyway, it's an interesting concept to think about, and I don't know where it all lands, but I do think that humans will always, when they get exposed to something truly exceptional, they won't forget it. I just don't know if they're going to run into it as often as I did when I was a kid and I went down to the record store and picked up Pink Floyd's The Wall and sat in a room with a gatefold sleeve with my best friend and played that thing from beginning to end and was like, oh my God. I don't think this generation gets to experience that kind of stuff so much in that immersive capacity. On the other hand, they get to experience the kind of connectedness with technology in a network capacity that was totally foreign to me. So I'm not saying that my experience is necessarily better. It's just different.
Well, talking about the kids, I think things have changed, as you wrote there, from quality to quantity. I mean, if I look at mine, they are constantly exposed to stuff. I now call it stuff. Yeah, some do TikTok, some do whatever else. Yeah, and there, let's talk a bit about fear. That the fear is that we scale down our own ambitions
Right.
and accept mediocrity. And
Right.
you have had me here a couple of times say that generative AI is derivative AI, part one, and it's causing instant mediocrity. Or was it
Right.
mediocrity?
Yep.
So, not my term. I think I stole it from somewhere, but I don't know from where.
Hyan Park.
Hyan? Okay, so
Congratulations. Check out
thanks, Hyan.
his blog post from a couple years ago on instant mediocrity.
So, and
which, by the way, he did not mean as an insult. He was using it as a way to understand generative AI use cases because he was pointing out that mediocrity at scale can serve a purpose, right? And so he was saying that the ability to produce something mediocre at a broad scale can sometimes be very useful. So anyway, we'll get back to that.
I still consider it kind of an insult because what stays on the road or in the mirror is creativity.
Yep.
Because ultimately we have a melee of something that just another variation of the same. Yeah. And this is something that we need to overcome again, also for the case of my unfavorite one, hyper-personalization. You just create another type of noise, then you're still noise. The signal gets lost.
Right.
And this is exactly what this term shall suggest, that there's a signal. And right now, even the signal gets lost, even though it mostly is intended for me and not for John. It's for Thomas, not for John. For you, it's a noise anyways, and for me too. And this means that the creative juices, wherever they come from, are not properly used.
You're heading into the crescendo of my talk
I'm
with
too
those
fast.
comments. No, it's great. We're gonna get back to those comments.
Short-circuited the next half hour.
No, we're all good. We'll get there. So now I want to take a look at the enterprise creator, because before I took a bigger look at creativity. So enterprises still need to notch wins, and skilled professionals are needed. Reaching informed buyers and leaders with relevant content still matters. They need that info for continuous learning. I've written a whole book about that as well. By the way, a lot of people don't know this, but I've written 2 books on creativity that I don't talk about them much because they have nothing to do with the enterprise. But anyway, just as a context for where I get all this content from. So there's 4 main forms of content, and so now I'm asking, which ones can AI help create in terms of enterprise content? Helpful content. Customer use cases are at the core of that. It's the bedrock of your content strategy. AI can help write these to some extent, and I've seen some examples of it. I'm a little wary of it because it can be very jargon heavy, the AI write-ups, but I've seen it work a little bit. But you still need someone to do a really good in-depth interview. And Thomas, you publish this type of use case content on videos and in writing. I recommend folks check out your blog for some examples of that. AI can help a little bit maybe with the writing of that, but I think it really requires someone like you to ask the questions, I think. And if you published AI written content around use cases, you would need to make sure that it contained issues of challenge on the project, how change management was handled, because AI would have a tendency, I think, to skirt over that and kind of present a very happy picture of a project. But with proper prompting, I think you could get it to emphasize the more challenging parts. So to some extent, I think AI could help that, but I think the core of that is still someone like you interviewing the customer and really getting a good story.
Pretty much agreed. So what it can help with is finding points in a preparation session,
right?
Finding topics that one could dive into where I am wearing my blinds, and all of us wear some blinds. So being asked, the system being asked, it can give me another perspective that I could pursue. The active part within the interview where John Reed says something and I react on this, what you say, because it offers another interesting avenue to possibly pursue. This is something that luckily the systems can't do yet, but they're actually fairly good in preparation for these types of, for any type of interview, actually. So pretty much agree to A.
And I'm leaving out a little bit around these examples in terms of all the things that AI can help with that surround the material, because obviously there's a bunch of things with post-production as well. There's things like transcribing interviews and spell checking, and there all kinds of crap. But anyway, the next thing, I think AI, this is the best AI content case of the ones I've listed here. And by the way, this is not a comprehensive list of all the content needs in the enterprise. This is a list of the ones that have the most impact trying to reach buyers and decision makers. FAQ product detail, AI could help develop such content with the major caveat that you have to have quality data and sources. But one of the reasons why I think this is a really good use case for AI is because it's really hard to maintain and create this kind of material at scale for all of your products and services. And eventually you can put like a front end on it as well and have a more interactive ability rather than just scrolling through a long FAQ document. It does need human oversight, and this is one of the things that a lot of vendors downplay. The AI is not good enough to be trusted completely. So there's some thought that has to be put into that. But you'd rather have a couple of human experts reviewing hundreds of pages of AI generated content than hiring a huge team to try to write that content themselves. It's just not going to happen. It's not like those people lose their jobs. They don't even have jobs doing that right now. You're just not doing the content. So I think that's a really good use case for AI, actually.
Yeah, and that one is actually even a bit broader. Now, creativity or not, it's also quite good at identifying what content needs to be written or which content needs to be improved.
Right. It can find the gaps in your. You could have it do a review of all your products and point out the gaps in content, or you could even do it based on personas and have it find the gaps in the persona, so-called buyer's journey for that persona. There's a lot of things you could do that it could poke holes in what you have, and then you could say, okay, fill that hole with this, and if you had quality data to support that, then I think you'd be on your way. Now we're going to get to the areas where I think AI is not going to be as good. Thought leadership content, provocative future of industry expert outlooks. AI can't do that. Sorry. I've seen some of you try. I've seen some of you try. It doesn't work. It's not exceptional enough. It's not good enough. Don't do it. Now, I'm not saying that you can't use the tools in the way, Thomas, you described to help you ask the right questions or whatever. But I'm just saying in terms of actually writing that in a compelling way, no, that it's not good at that. I'll let you react in just a sec. Let me go on to the next one too. Project lessons across projects. Now here, I think AI can potentially be really of some assistance because one of the things AI is really, really good at is summarization. So in other words, if you fed an AI system 20 to 30 of your best customer case studies and say, delineate the top lessons from these projects, I think you could have some real value there. Having said that, some of that should then, in my opinion, be rewritten by a human in a less buzzwordy style than the AI is going to. The AI is just terrible about puking out industry buzzwords. But I do think it would be very good at the summarization part. Thomas, your comments on C&D.
Yeah, C&D. So it all depends on the prompt, basically. Yes. So what I'm recently doing for other purposes is I'm asking for, let's call them research reports on all sorts of personal research, from where would I live in Charlotte or in Charleston to which moving company is best. Yeah. So when it comes to the outcomes of these tools, they are actually quite interesting because they build an argumentative structure based upon my question. And obviously,
Right.
the better the question, the better the response. Yeah? What they also do is they do comparative analysis according to some criteria that I give. Fine, that's as per expectation. Well, it's minimum expectation even. But they also find some more criteria to assess this, let's say, moving companies for, because of, well, I wouldn't know what additional criteria are there. Yeah. So having said that, this, in my eyes, also can be transposed into future-looking things.
Thomas, can I stop you for one quick sec? One thing I wanted to point out about what you've just described is that a lot of those tools are quote unquote sort of like the new deep research reasoning engine tools. And the thing that I do like about them, although the idea that it's actually human reasoning is complete bullshit, but the one thing I do like about them is that a lot of them do include citations in the reasoning. And that's really important to me personally,
Yes.
and I think it should be important to a lot of people, because more conventional AI tooling before these reasoning engines didn't typically provide you with sources, though you could do that through RAG architectures, but in general you couldn't get the sources. I think it's really important with these kinds of scenarios you're describing that at least some of the crucial source documents are listed for your own investigation.
And there they are, meanwhile, increasingly doing a very good job. Well, increasingly so. Full disclosure, I'm mainly using, I just wanted to say Diginomica, but
all right, Diginomica. Wow, the plug happened. Excellent.
No, so for that, I'm mainly using Gemini and OpenAI. So both of them are fairly good at giving citations. They are at various qualities in giving the relevant citations. So sometimes you find some stuff that you, that are worth a face palm. Yeah? So closing the loop into the direction of future looking. So if they give the citations, let's say it's about, the citations are from archive, for example. This is future looking. Yes. And if they are even correct and connect the dots, in theory, you have a thought leadership article, which then may or may not be some editing, because I mean, if it's my style, I better have it written in my style, so I need to get over it. Or have Gemini look at all my blogs and have it apply the convoluted style that I applied there. But all of the sudden, you are close to having something that is looking forward and compelling.
Yeah, Brent, I got a plug, man, for Diginomica. 30 minutes in.
Yeah.
Finally got it. How about that?
Yeah.
Brent,
Maybe we
by the
should
way,
plug this.
Sorry, go ahead, Thomas.
Maybe we should put a plug for the CRM players too.
Oh, yeah. Well, of course, if you're not tracking Brent's video content, then you better get on that real quick. Brent, I'm looking forward to your commentary, though you may want to hold fire until you hear the rest of this, but feel free to chime in anytime. So Thomas, I want to move on briefly to this next one. I've been talking about the jargon creep. Here's a great example, because you know that many of these things are on these sites. They now are inserting themselves into, we're going to write your post for you. We'll be happy to do that. So I wanted to show you this comparison between my version at the top and the AI version. So mine said this. I wrote this myself. My latest Diginomica missive. Stevens has seen plenty of shifts over his decades in this business, but the changes construction and real estate companies now face is a post-pandemic litany of issues. How are customers responding? Time to dig in. Okay, that's not a work of art, but I wrote that. That's my own voice. This is supposedly the improved version. My latest Diginomica missive explores the evolving landscape of construction and real estate companies post-pandemic. Stevens, with decades of experience in the industry, sheds light on the myriad of challenges these sectors are currently navigating. How are customers adapting to these changes? Like, oh my God. So
All of a sudden, you sound educated.
yeah, like I sound. Do you really want to read that? I mean, come on.
No.
The point is like, the point is be really really careful about the difference between like efficiency of content versus putting your own voice out there, and that's just my own plea is like there. I think there's a difference between savvy utilization of these tools and falling into a jargon laden abyss. Then I get into some stuff around.
Still, it's sometimes funny to look what the LinkedIn copywriter makes out of one's posts. At least if you want to have a laugh.
Exactly. I mean, the LinkedIn lunatics threads in Reddit are full of those. So anyway, I have some slides I'm not going to spend a lot of time on now, but because I've covered these in past sessions. But sort of what is AI good at from a creative perspective, and I took some from Josh Burnoff. I added some of my own. A compelling storyline narrative. AI struggles with that, except for sort of duplicating formulaic narratives, which are in its training set. Satire, AI really sucks at satire and humor. AI sucks at fact checking, by the way. Subjectivity and honesty, exerting your own experience into your theoretical constructs. Deep subject matter expertise. Now, AI can do some of that, but it can only source what it's trained on to a large extent versus a really deep subject matter expert. For example, someone like you, Thomas, you're going to see something in tomorrow's headlines and you're going to think of the implications for CX, for example, that no one else would have thought of. And AI can't do that even if it's trained on those topics. And then new ideas and newsy developments. AI is always chasing new ideas from behind, though real-time inference has closed that gap somewhat. But for those of us that are trying to stay one step ahead, that's sort of the nudge that machines give us. And ultimately, I think one of the big pushes that we get from the level of sophistication these current machines have, which is not as sophisticated as many people think, but a lot more sophisticated than the critics say, is pushing us into more human areas, right? When you look at the things I've listed here, it's all about stepping away from the pseudo objectivity of professional discourse and looking at how you insert the human side of yourself into the work that you do and make yourself and your work more relatable.
Yeah, but there are a couple of points to it actually. If you're going back to, I would disagree to all three of the quotes that Josh made. So the width, if you ask the system for width and a tone of voice, you to quite an extent get it.
Right.
So let's look at my
and to be fair to Josh, I think that was like a year and a half old, but I would agree with you. Okay. Like mine were I think better than Josh's, to be honest with you, but
wouldn't disagree.
But anyway, continue.
So the same for the content part. So this it gets more and more there. Yep. Also from an insight point of view. Yeah. So the point is data. And to me, this increasingly goes back to what I just read as the definition of creativity. The question is, what is creativity? And I always have my favorite duck there. So if it looks like one, walks like one, and walks like one, it probably is one. So who are we to decide that something is not creative or is creative?
Right now, and I view that as something of a distraction from my talk, because I don't really, I'm willing to concede that that's a difficult argument, and I don't think the answer to that argument is core to my point of view, so I'm going to continue. But I would agree with you that that's not as easy to answer as one would think.
Yeah.
So let me tell you what my actual conclusions are. that there's no techno shortcuts to the internal riddle, which I call the sacred excavation to find your own voice. That to me is at the heart of this, Thomas, not an esoteric debate over what creativity is. The goal is the goal in life, in my opinion, and you can take it or leave it, is to cultivate your own uniqueness and find a way of expressing that in the world. And there's no shortcuts to that. I'm sorry, there's no techno savior that will save you from that process of going inside yourself, figuring out what really matters to you, and then finding a way to express it. And then in the enterprise context, earning the right kind of attention. And ironically enough, the same skills are needed to do both. And technical tools have always played a role in creative IP generation, but they don't change. They don't change the essence of the self-confrontation, which is, in the enterprise context, put out expert work that reeks of authenticity on a regular basis, and good things happen. And AI can play a lot of roles in that, including personalized distribution, analytics, marketing. But the reason that I'm emphasizing these points is that I find it's a really big missing ingredient for most companies and individuals. And the reality is that if you go into that type of journey and come out with something unique, then you're going to figure out how to use these tools to your best advantage, but you're also going to cultivate a distinctive voice that's your own. And whether or not you consider yourself truly creative, whether you think the machine's helping you to create, to me, it doesn't really matter, as long as you didn't take a shortcut and you went deep and you found your point of view. And before generative AI, the danger was that social media was going to take this away from you too. And I always used to say about social media, when people asked me for my advice on how to approach it, it was, don't show up on social media until you have something to say. Like, don't do the work first, develop a strong point of view, develop some methodologies of your own, develop some ideas and content of your own, and then by all means, freely friggin' share, get in the fray, get in the conversation. You know, I mean, the thing that I think is cool about someone like yourself is I see you in social conversations, but I know that they're informed by all the diligent research that you have been doing to think through what your point of view is. You're not just showing up to get attention. Like, and I think in the conversation ends up informing everything else.
Yeah. I mean, the core message was right in the middle of the previous slide. But what we now have is a technical tool that really helps us challenging ourselves.
Yep.
By
right.
harvesting lots of thought that is already there and synthesizing that. And at that point in time, sometimes when we are standing there and asking ourselves, why do we dare thinking different?
Yep. Well, and this is not a conversation for today's discussion to go in depth, but one of my more unpopular views about AI and generative AI in particular is that it does have the potential to confront us and our biases. Now, and the reason for that is because it views things from a totally different perspective than we do, and it's not really concerned about our feelings.
Not at all, yeah.
which is really, I think, very helpful. Now, that's not to say that I don't agree 100% with all the material around why these data sets are culturally biased and everything else. That's 100% true, and that's going to remain a potent and significant problem. Brent says, I can honestly say you both show up for the right reasons in the right way. And there you go, Brent. I mean, the thing is that when Brent, when you're producing your content, one of the reasons why I trust that content and watch it is because you're always yourself, and you would never put like an avatar of yourself speaking generative AI to your interview guest. It's always going to be you. You might talk about generative AI with your interview guest. Maybe someday you'll interview an avatar, but it will be you. And I think
maybe I someday have my avatar interview another avatar. Yeah,
it could happen.
And watch it. Comment from the sidelines.
But don't count on me being there. This is a little bit off topic, but I just thought this was such a great quote. Generative AI is so much more interesting when it's about better outcomes for all, not just replacing humans in efficiency plays. And this is from this woman I discovered called Shannon Valerie. She's the author of AI Mirror. This is from a video on reclaiming your humanity with AI, like a talk that she gave. But anyway, it's really, really interesting. She talks about how the way hospital administrators think is adding this AI system on top of my costly clinicians just to improve outcomes, not just to save time. That's they push back against that, but ultimately she's saying we should be using these tools to say, what are we not good at? What are the sort of mistakes humans keep making? How can we use the AI system as a guardrail against that human error? So we know, for example, there are hospitals that use AI tools to double check our work in ways that can lead to better outcomes than relying on the human alone or the AI system alone. But you have to be willing to invest in better outcomes, not just cheaper outcomes or faster outcomes. I think that's a really lovely way to think about it. I'm not saying that that's how it's going to play out in all of the world. I'm not that stupid or naive. But I do think there's a role for individuals and companies who want to go about it this way and really want AI to serve in the service of better experiences for all. And I do think it's possible. So anyway, if you haven't checked into her work, she is like, she's got a big mind.
I mean, it's most certainly possible, just that our human thinking is, business thinking is different.
Yes, right. And to some extent, you're going to have to get some efficiency plays to build momentum, and I get that. And so I'm not saying that efficiency plays are always wrong, but I think this is a really good framing, and she's got a lot of interesting examples along these lines. So we're going. This is all fresh material on my conclusions. So do the reckoning, find your unique voice, build your mastery around it, and I say there's no shortcuts to the creative cycle of reflection, research, reflection, creation. And, I've defined this cycle in different ways over the years, but this will serve you well. And it will still serve you well. And in fact, I think it will serve you better. Now, if you're someone like Thomas, and we can talk about this more maybe in a future video, you've integrated these tools into this process quite a bit. And I don't have any problem with that at all. And I use them somewhat. I think I'm not as embracing of it as some, but I do. And the point is that cycle continues, and that's how original work is created. Do not minimize the value of human creative problem solving on all aspects of business, which is sort of my thing of all the gurus on stage that are not listing creativity amongst the skills the future workforce needs to have. Come on, get a clue. Don't let generative AI evangelists and Kool-Aid adopters of this technology let you diminish that beautiful, brave adventure. But experiment all over the place. Have fun with these tools, but also take it from an ethical vantage point, and you and I will have no problems. Finally, immersive and interactive content is still indispensable. We're not going to fix technology projects or our vexing social problems with 30-second AI-generated content snacks. Thomas, this is where you were heading a long time ago in this video. And this is from this longer video appearance I did with Brian Solis and John Cow a couple years ago. You can see on YouTube. But the quote is actually quite a bit longer than that, and I want to share a little bit of that quote with you, and then, Thomas, you can react to these conclusions. So what I said in the video interview is that well, first of all, I got really pissed off because I saw someone throwing up this AI that supposedly could create a free-form guitar solo that sounds like Frank Zappa. And I said, like, if you have no idea, like, what Zappa fans care about, there's no way they're going to get fooled by that soulless crap, like, imitation. Sorry. And then I kind of went on to talk about, like this whole thing around, like, what is quality, which gets back to your thing around what is creativity. And what is quality is a whole different thing too, because you could perhaps make an argument that quality is what gets our attention, and if quality is just virality and shocking content and content snacks and baby pictures and stolen artwork, then it is what it is. But snackable content seems more likely to generate impressions a lot of times than in-depth reporting. Hyperbolic headlines outperform descriptive ones, and maybe reader engagement becomes a proxy for quality. And I guess that could happen. I'm just pushing pushing back against that. And so, anyway, so I eventually got a pitch from someone who wanted to turn my content into 30-second AI generated content snacks. And I said that I'm going to take a stand, and of course I do generate some shorter video clips, and I wish I had time to do more of them because I think there's a place for them. But I hold by my point here that we need deeper immersive content to get to the heart of the enterprise problems that we face and our vexing social problems as well. And I go back to the video that you and Sam Gupta did earlier today, where you had a very, very in-depth discussion on AI processing models and consumption-based pricing and value-based pricing and all of that. And this went on for quite some time, and you even took a bunch of peanut gallery comments from me. We couldn't have solved that in 30 seconds. It would not have been satisfying. It would not have been useful to the enterprise decision maker. So my caution around this stuff is that be careful what you wish for, because if you're going to allow yourself to be defined by little viral content snacks, then so be it. But good luck solving the problems that we're facing if that's how we're going to go about it.
Yeah, that's what most of those people who solely create this stuff are actually not even interested in. My cynic worldview is they are solely interested in their own income, period.
Sure.
And in general, we need we need shorts in order to get enough attention or enough traction towards the long content. Because if you have a problem that you want to solve, the ones that can get solved just like snipping your finger they are solved long time ago. So whatever we need to look at right now needs deeper thinking, needs the long content. It needs a book and not a comic.
Yep.
And the comic there has the ability or offers the ability of creating interest for the book.
Yep.
And this is where we can introduce it for.
Right. Yep, absolutely. And so again, I think if you kind of think of it like that immersive foundational content as the foundation level, then you build up from that and you get into more snackable chunks.
Yeah.
But there's such a tremendous difference when those snackable pieces of content, and maybe even they're a little bit viral and sensational, like point to a deeper foundation that can be explored. Now, granted, not everyone's going to go down that path. We understand that, right? But creating that not only gives you that credibility factor that you need in an enterprise context, but it gives people that chance to go through that thought process with you and discover through your journey how they can approach those kinds of problems and maybe adapt it to their own needs or reconstruct it. I mean, a lot of times the value of going to an in-depth piece of content is to deconstruct it and figure out a different way that you would do it. But you still need to bash your head against that full thing. And like, I remember you did like a video of me, I think, on one of your shows where I went off on some thing. Oh, and then you did another one with data driven recently where I went off on data driven the other one you did was better in this sense for this example, which was, it was something I was trashing something about AI. I can't remember what, but the point is there was a whole video to back that up where we got into a much deeper discussion. That was just a moment where I kind of lost my shit for a second. You put it on like a short video. But the cool thing about that was that, yeah, you could have an entertaining, listen to someone lose his mind a little bit, but then you could also go into that deeper context. And so to me, that is the best of all worlds, right? Where I'm not discounting the power of virality and the occasional sensational moment. But I do think that when it's built on a bedrock of really immersive thought, it just carries so much more weight and is such a wonderful adventure too. I mean, that's how I found out about this woman, Shannon Valerie, that I quoted. It was like actually like a YouTube short, and then it led me to a longer video, and led me to her book or whatever. And like that journey of discovery is what's so cool. It's like, instead of just seeing like something flash before your eyes in some disposable stream of TikTok algorithmic like disposability. It's actually a journey into the heart of someone's thinking
Yeah.
about how to create better AI for a better world. And you
Mm-hmm.
know, and so to me, like that's what really matters. And the reason that I've been able to kind of really enjoy my enterprise work is because like not everyone cares about this stuff in the enterprise. But the beauty of it is, if you don't care about some of these issues, you're not going to have successful projects. You're going to have shitty projects.
Yeah.
So, fortunately, there's some people that want to have successful projects out there, and
Luckily, yeah.
that's why you and I still have careers, man.
Mm. Question is how much of a career I do want to have, yeah? Or how much fun
Yeah.
doing what I do I want to have. So
Right. Yeah.
there I actually look at it the same way as I said this morning. So you need to define your own success as a consequence, not as an objective. Because
Right.
if a career happens to come out of that, this is because I am actually, or you are, well, you have a career out of Diginomica is quite successful. But this is because the stuff that you publish is good. It's really good. Yeah. And it's coming from different angles. It's opinionated and founded, well founded. So, and my impression is that outlets like Diginomica are not doing that to promote themselves, but to help become successful. So this is exactly the outside-in approach that I am advocating for it pretty much wherever I am not invited to be listened to. So this is probably alien thinking right now, but it's longer term, far more successful than the other way around. When you have maybe a short-term success for the next quarter and then run in front of or against the next wall because this short-termism prohibits longer-term thinking, the creative finding of solutions that work tomorrow, not only today. So this is the main difference. If I'm looking at TikTok, what are they doing? They are looking at selling yet another thing. This doesn't say that the developers of the model or the algorithm behind it haven't been incredibly creative in creating something that is as powerful as that thing. But how it's used is, well, short-term gain, nothing more.
Indeed. And I think what's interesting about this process of that I described about this process of excavation, finding your own unique voice and expressing it, is you don't know exactly where you're going to land in all of that. Some people end up in much more conventional occupations, and some people end up more outliers than like me. But it's beautiful when you discover that, because once you realize that and you stick with it, you realize that that's the most wonderful source of differentiation you can have, and you just stick with it. But like you said, it's really counterintuitive, because as I've gotten further and further in my career, I become more and more narrow visioned around what I'm trying to do in this sense, which is when I get up every day, I don't think about like how well Diginomica is doing, or will I have a job in 6 months, or am I some kind of guru, or how do I rank amongst influencers in this segment, or did someone kiss my ass on LinkedIn? I don't think about any of that shit. What I think about is, what's a burning question I'm trying to figure out today, and can I write about it in such a way to bring the reader along with what I'm trying to figure out, and can I just do that today, and then on top of that, maybe can I help a few people today, and maybe can I answer a few questions and make a difference in someone's life today in some small way. And like I told someone the other day, like, it's really weird, but stacking up days like that just works. And the rest of it just doesn't matter. Whereas even 10 years ago, I was, working on all these 5 and 10 year goals and plans. And I do have goals and plans, obviously, but so much of it now for me is just keeping it real every day. And like you said, any success you derive or don't, it's just a byproduct of that. That's all it is. It's just something that comes out of that. And, I guess I've reached the point in my life where I've done so much work on these issues that I feel like it's worth sharing this perspective, because I think that while I think there's a lot of positives in what you can do with artificial intelligence technology, I do think that it has the potential to obscure these truths and to make things too convenient and easy. And I think you got to be really, really careful about that, because I don't believe that life was intended to be convenient and easy. It's not what it was supposed to be.
Also, where did I read that recently? So there was the summary of a study that basically said that depending on how you use AIs, you neglect critical thinking, or you actually lose the ability of critical thinking.
Some atrophy of critical thinking. Some studies have started to document a little bit of that. Yeah.
And that is really dangerous. And this is not an abstract risk. This is it's very real, because look at what's happening at companies. Everybody, I normally don't like everybody. This changes everything. Most people need to do more with less time. And now incoming is this helper that gives you a recommendation. Oh, sounds plausible, just do it. So we are not questioning this recommendation anymore. And
hasn't worked out very well for the lawyers that have done that, I will add.
Yeah.
But
the one that got found out, at least, yeah.
If you do a search, you'll see a number of similar anecdotes.
Yeah.
And some very irritated judges from across many continents. But anyway, your point being, like, press the button, it gets easy.
We are time pressed. Yeah. And that's why we don't question anymore. And that has an immense potential of biting us, well, as those lawyers found out. At least some of them lost their license, didn't they?
There have been
they may no more appear in front of the bar.
There have been consequences. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's quite interesting, because I think there is a need to be able to work with this technology, but like you said, there's also this need to figure out, like, what deficiencies might be being created by over dependence, and how do you address that on a team level, on an enterprise level, and also on an individual level. And I think it's going to be fascinating from an educational standpoint to figure out how to do that. And I went to a liberal arts college, Hampshire College, self-designed curriculum, all that stuff, and a lot of the lessons from that educational environment have served me very well, because it was an emphasis on creative and critical thinking, not on acquiring a set body of knowledge. And obviously acquiring a set body of knowledge is becoming more and more of a discredited way of learning in terms of memorization. And because computers are pretty damn good at that. They're way better than human brains at memorization. Which is different than mastery. Mastery is sort of a praxis of trial and error, and but memorization's been discredited, I think, as a goal of education to a large extent. But anyway, so the point being, like, I learned all those skills in college, and it's a fascinating development now, because I have a friend that I help who has been volunteering to help a lot of these colleges. A lot of them are in financial distress right now, which is quite a fascinating, tragic twist, because the education they're providing is pretty much exactly what you need to work amongst these machines right now. And although I am pushing my old college to spend more time integrating things like machine intelligence ethics and other things into their curriculum, because it can't be completely separate from the technological developments. I still think people need to learn how to code, for example, and because you still need to know how to get under the hood of these things when they break. And this
Hmm.
idea that we don't need to learn that anymore because it does it all for us is absolutely ridiculous. But the point
Nuts.
is the point is that it's really quite fascinating because the implications for education are incredibly profound, and things are moving very fast right now. And I do worry for a lot of young people around how they're going to adapt to these tools, but also still, like you said, nourish their whole selves so that they do have those critical thinking capacities,
Mm.
as well as being able to use these tools probably in ways that are much more savvy and intuitive than anything I've ever thought of, because they're growing up with these tools in a way that I haven't. So,
Yeah.
you know, it'll be interesting to see
Yeah.
if they can take some of the best of what I got, but then also they're going to have stuff that I
Mm.
don't have. So,
Yeah, and the colleges and universities, they don't know yet themselves where they stand. My oldest is in college. She has classes where it's absolutely supported and actually required to work with tools like ChatGPT. And in others, they get points docked if they do. So there's no opinion yet. Yes, and from an education point of view, if we deviate into that direction, that needs to come too. So where is it good? Where is it important? And where is it dangerous?
right.
And anything in between. Yeah.
Yep. And, the thing that I keep thinking about is like the moments in my life that that meant so much to me, like what was like a liberation from the cycle of seeking approval or feedback from the outside world, and it was more that feeling of that I had pushed myself as far as I could, and here was the result. And so, like, the first time I held my first book in my hands, and the thrill never wears off. And some of those books haven't been very successful. One of them was pretty successful. It doesn't really matter. Like, it's amazing how little that matters. What matters is that moment when you, and I'm sure you've had equivalent experiences, but you
Hold it
have
in your
this
hand.
thing, and you feel that, and you feel how hard you got pushed to, and how hard you had to dig to get that out of you. And
Mm.
that, to me, I want everyone to experience that in their lives, because I don't think anything replaces that, not even relationships. And in fact, sometimes relationships like kind of suffer and become claustrophobic when you don't have the freedom to also do that. When you do have that freedom and can do that, then relationships tend to take on a wonderful new dimension.
Mhm. Yeah.
I want people to experience that. And the whole point is, you don't even have to have some legendary result. Like, it's just that you did the best that you could to cultivate that inside yourself and realize it. And if a technology gets in the way of that, then that's wrong. And I don't think any technology should, unless you allow it to, because you don't know any better or you've just bought into it. Don't
Mhm.
deprive yourself of that experience. And when I think about AI and creativity and stuff, and I've listened to some interesting AI music that was okay, but then the other day I was listening to a couple young people react to the Rolling Stones' "Gimme Shelter," which I think is one of the greatest rock songs ever made. And you hit that crucial point in the song where Mary Clayton comes on and guest vocals, and her voice literally cracks because of the urgency of the vocal performance.
Mhm.
Like, and Mick, and you can vaguely hear Mick Jagger yelling in the background, and they kept it in the recording because it was just so intense. I mean, Mary Clayton
Mhm.
later had a miscarriage after that vocal performance, but it's one of the backstory behind that appearance is like the stuff of legend. You can research it, but that moment in time, like, and to me, that was like the kind of thing that inspired me when I wanted to create, was like, And I never achieved that kind of like pinnacle, but the point was it didn't matter. Like being inspired to try to experience something like that inside myself was the whole point of my friggin' life. And I just don't want people to miss that opportunity. Now, granted, a lot of people will choose not to go that route and won't do that, and that's fine. But to not be exposed to it is a different matter entirely. And so I've realized that part of my job is to try to expose people to that kind of thinking. So I appreciate you indulging me today, because I think it can make our enterprise work a lot better and more fun too. It's not just, I try to tie the two things together a bit because I think the enterprise is desperate for this kind of content, connected to the proper industry and perspective and all of that. But we crave this kind of stuff. I mean, we crave these more informal opportunities to engage around what matters, and let's friggin' do it. Let's not relegate all of that to the side because AI is cool,
Oh, it's fun to use sometimes.
Right, absolutely, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Especially if it does what I want it to do.
Yeah, and
there's a free research prompt that I'm continuing to write and improve upon. That
which we barely touched on your research stuff in this episode, but we may return to that in the future because that's a whole interesting animal of you trying to become. It might be interesting to do a juxtaposition because you're doing that where I'm still relying on my 1,100 carefully curated RSS feeds as probably one of the key ways that I interpret the enterprise, along with my podcast feeds, which is my supplemental thing, is all my podcasts. But anyway, it might be fun for us to juxtapose like my RSS approach to your finally honing your prompts.
It probably takes as long to hone that prompt as it took you to create your RSS feed.
Hey man, the work is done now. I mean, the work is done now. Back at the time, I was like, this is so cutting edge. I've got 1,200 feeds, and like now I'm like a dinosaur. But
works until they cut off RSS.
which they probably won't, because feeds still propagate in the world. You just have to know how to excavate them. They're getting a little harder sometimes to pull out, but you can still find them.
And the other way of thinking around doing the same with another technology is, does this technology simulating an RSS feed via a prompt actually add value? Or is it like blockchain, just doing the same thing at higher cost?
Sounds like good fodder for a future discussion on the future of analyst research in the age of AI. Thomas, we might have to rejoin that conversation. I think we're pretty much out of gas for today, but that would be a good one.
Most certainly out of time.
Yep. Do you want to give us a couple of final comments, and then we're going to close it out?
Yeah, well, in terms of creativity, just bring it back to that word. What I do think is that AI tools, in particular Gen AI tools, LLMs, are good helpers to channel my own creativity or give me a way of exposing my own creativity in ways that I didn't have before. As the example with the image creation. I suck at creating images. Well, so does the prompts that I create for the LLMs, but on these I can work. If those things obey me, and ChatGPT doesn't always ignore me when I say, get those letters and digits out of your image. It always tells me it did, but failed, lied to me. Anyway, so this is probably the closing thing. So it's a tool to help us dig into our own creativity.
Yep. And let's figure out how to continue to do that while trying to do a little more for all the human creators that made these tools possible, who have lost a lot of their intellectual property value and sources of income through through AI. Let's
Yeah.
see, we can do a little better on those people. I've made the rest of my positions clear, and I think we have a dog that has decided that the show is over, and I'm going to actually agree
Yeah.
with the dog. The show is over.
The dog heard the doorbell ring. This is because a
I think we are
contractor came.
done. Nope.
Yeah.
I prefer to think of it as the dog thinks the show is
It's
over.
creative
I
thinking.
think absolutely it's over. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it, Thomas.
Thanks.